What is up, Doe? Welcome to another edition of Pixel and Roll, where we talk all things the Washington Wizards. How you doing? My name is Adam McGinnis from Truth About It, the ESPN True Hoop blog that covers your favorite Wizards. It is Tuesday, January 27th, 2015, a Tuesday night, very chilly day here in the nation's capital. We missed the snowstorm, but the Wizards are currently 30-15. With me today is a colleague of mine, a man that has been covering this team just as many painful years as I have, Mr. Rashad Mobley. Rashad, how the hell are you, my man?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Are you brave the snowstorm? I was hoping for a snow day today. I don't know about yourself.
I live in D.C. I don't believe in any snowstorms. It's all a fraud, man. So
you work for the Mayor Bowser's staff, or?
Yeah, I might as well. She's the same age as me now. You know, I just turned 40. She's about 41, 42.
Sweet. Well, like I said, what we're gonna do today is just kind of talk about some general things. First time I had Rashad on this season. We've jammed before in the past, and kind of get his assessment of the season, and kind of some issues we've seen arise, and kind of talk about some recent games. Rashad, like I mentioned, 30-15, second in the East. Just, your overall assessment of what you've seen out of this basketball team this season.
I mean, I think because we cover the team on a nightly basis, it's easy to be overly critical of the record should be a little better and we should be saying this and that, but they've never been in a position like they are this year where they're actually the favorites. They're supposed to win every night. There aren't three better teams in the Eastern Conference, so this team, aside from Pierce, has never been in a situation where they're expected to win every night, and that's not an easy adjustment to make. So considering that they're expected to win and they're expected to go deep in the playoffs for the first time in years, I think they're doing pretty good. I mean, there have been instances where Wall plays hero ball, where Wittman isn't exactly coaching the way he should, and Paul Pierce disappears, but it's before February. You're going to see these things. You're going to see growing pains. I think what matters is how they go into the All-Star break and then ultimately how they come out. So I have no complaints about the team so far. What about you?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like I said on a previous podcast show, they've kind of lived up to some expectations. They've kind of changed the role a little bit. They beat the teams they should beat, and then some of the elites, they've had some unfortunate hiccups, but they also have held their own a few times. And every time we were waiting for them to maybe stumble or come back to earth, they haven't. So I think that overall you have to be, very happy. I mean, especially with the record 30-15, and they're on the West Coast right now. We're recording this before they play the Lakers tonight and the Suns tomorrow night before they come home and play a Raptors team that they're competing for position in the East on Saturday night. But yeah, I think as a fan you have to be pleasantly surprised that they've lived up to this hype. Following up on how they played well at the end of the season last year and their first postseason victory in 9 years, and that they kind of continue with the momentum, and you've kind of seen this team round about it. Being the bloggers and the journalists we are on a nighttime basis, we're going to nitpick them, though. But I think this isn't. I'm talking about, oh my God, all these terrible players and philosophy changes and fundamental and where are they going, what are they doing, and we're just kind of nitpicking around the edges, I think. But I think that just shows where this team has developed and what kind of level they've reached, where we're kind of looking at more situational kind of criticism than just a holistic approach.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are some, and we'll get to it later, but there are some legitimate criticisms of this team. There are some things that concern me. Backup point guard, lack of crunch time, Pierce not showing up. But if you told me that they would be 30-15, getting close to the All-Star break, and they would be in the top 4 in the East, I'd have no complaints.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty soon it's going to be close to talk about playoff positioning and first round matchups, and we don't get too far ahead. But I was just thinking about the other day, about who they would play and who they would miss in the second round, and usually I'm looking at the college stars right now to see who's going to fall in the lottery, and it's a different feeling.
Right.
And so I would kind of want to piggyback to go on is. What have you seen as the say the biggest surprise of the season? What you've noticed?
Well, besides Rasul Butler, um, I would say, with the exception of a couple of nights, we really don't miss Trevor Ariza. I expected to miss him a lot more, especially on the defensive end, but between Rasul Butler scoring and Wall picking it up, I really haven't missed Trevor Ariza. And I'd say the one exception was against OKC when, for extended stretches, Rasul Butler was trying to guard Kevin Durant. And while Kevin Durant is pretty much unguardable, you want somebody who's long and who can bother him and is a little athletic. And Rasul Butler was hapless against him. And that was one of the few nights where I actually missed Ariza. But I really thought I would miss him more. I didn't expect Otto Porter to make me miss him, but I just thought that we would miss his defense. But I'm surprised that the Wizards have been able to be as good as they've been defensively without the talents of Trevor Ariza, who hasn't exactly been burning it up in Houston either. So that would be the biggest surprise. On the negative end, I'm a little surprised Beal isn't playing better every night. I don't know whether he's still shaking off the injury or he's deferring to Wall, but I thought, especially coming off those last two playoff series last year, he would be a little more aggressive and take that next step. And he still's a little, I don't know, he's a little hesitant, and I don't know what it is. He's just not as strong as I thought he would be.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Ariza point, sometimes I wonder, is it a product of LeBron not being LeBron and not facing the Cavs? We've only faced them twice. The Wizards have. Paul George being injured. In the Kevin Durant thing, where where Ariza really came out, and maybe in a 7-game series we saw the Bulls where they put him on Augustine, where it hasn't really come to play where you're like, this guy is killing the Wizards, we can't stop him, Wall's not doing it, we need Ariza to guard the best point guard, the best wing, and I can't really come up to where aside from the two OKC games where it hasn't really been like one player is just destroying them. When they've lost and got blown out, it's like everyone the Hawks couldn't three, everyone the Raptors couldn't miss. Where there hasn't been, so maybe it hasn't came into play yet, but I think you were correct as in the team defense has been that the cog of Trevor Ariza being taken out, there wasn't an overall negative impact on the team defense. They're still top 5 and top 5, top 10, depending on what metric you look at in team defense. Maybe some of that is having Nene all season. I think maybe that's been, for kind of masqueraded any loss that we've had with Ariza. And Wall, I think, elevating his game defensively, and I think Beal has as well. And Pierce, like you mentioned, Pierce and Butler have been able. There hasn't been any glaring liabilities. I mean, I know Seraphin drives me nuts at Pat sometimes, but he's actually improving somewhat on the defensive end, and I have to give him somewhat credit. So there hasn't been maybe glaring holes, and then the whole structure of it as well. But like maybe this maybe would be a conversation in spring that might come out that we're missing more, but I do agree with that. So going back, would your biggest disappointment of the season be the Bradley Beal, or is there another disappointment on the team that you've seen?
It's really been Paul Pierce. I mean, and perhaps it's unfair of me to expect a man my age to be able to be a little more consistent, but there are certain nights where he just seems to check out. And I see the close-ups on the bench when he's trying to pump up Gortat or, trying to pump the team up, and I see that. But it would be nice to see him every now and then have those nights where he says, "Okay, I'm going to win this for you guys." And I don't think that's unrealistic to expect a veteran to do. Not every night, because he tried to do that in Brooklyn and it didn't work. But I expected to see a little more out of him. But even while I'm talking, I just don't know how realistic it is for a man his age to be able to step up with his play and his word. So that's one disappointment. My other disappointment is not, a little bit in Coach Wittman. I mean, he's still a curmudgeon, he's still cranky, and he still makes these decisions once a game where you just don't understand, what his thought process is, whether it's keeping Butler in the game too long or just his decision making, his substitution patterns have not always been consistent. That could just be who he is. We shouldn't expect better, but that's a little disappointment. But I'm going to stick with Pierce. I expected to see a little more. What about you?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it before. I think the Glenn Rice Jr., and I don't want to get into it because I think it's a whole podcast about development and that whole argument and wasting second-round picks. I think that, going from somewhere like league MVP to now being cut half the season in, that has been kind of a disappointment. I think you mentioned a little bit on Beal. Beal not kind of elevating his game on a night-to-night basis. His injury slowed him down. That's been a mild disappointment. Gooden, nothing out of Blair, really. I can't think of any really games that Good made any kind of impact positively. Now that could just be a numbers game because he hasn't really got that many opportunities. Definitely that's the case with Blair, but something must be happening with Blair where he's been well. I think going back to the surprise, for me personally, I think Chris Humphries, Kyle Truth About It founder, Mr. Kyle Leah, who I'm sure is watching this live, he can't wait to hear this recording because he loves my voice. But he wrote a really good piece the other day, just breaking down Chris Humphries' mid-range game and how awesome it's been, and how he's not hitting threes per se, but he's kind of been that stretch four that Wall has kind of needed or wanted for the last few years. That we definitely that the Wizard media made a big deal about last or even 2 summers ago, and kind of made a big deal about when Pierce was acquired because he played so well at the 4 for the Nets that you thought that was the stretch 4. That really hasn't panned out. I mean, I know they've closed with Paul Pierce at the 4, but I think some of that is just because they wanted Butler in the game and maybe some more shooting. That hasn't really been like a matchup thing that's really kind of came like a glaring strength for the Wizards. So I think Humphries' play, I mean, the other night against Denver, he was balling out of his mind. And I don't know how much this is a product of just being able to create these open looks for players, Butler or Humphries or Ariza or Webster a couple years ago. But also, I mean, that shows that Humphries has put in the work. He's a better shooter than I thought. He hasn't done too much, and he's been able to rebound, and he's been kind of a crowd favorite and an energy guy. And he's kind of developed, and he's been kind of one of the, I think maybe one of the unsung heroes on this team so far this season. So that's been a kind of pleasant surprise for me, especially as someone who's a Booker fan and they let Booker go. So I think in that sense. But I think going back to the disappointment of the Wittman thing that you mentioned is that he's frustrating, and we're going to get into the whole philosophy of his offensive philosophy. It's a question I asked him at a practice a few weeks ago. But I think going into I think with your sub patterns is that sometimes you're like, why isn't Beal and Wall always on the court at one time? Like one of those guys should be on the court, and it should be Rasul Butler, right. Andre Miller running around with Otto Porter trying to get some buckets. And it seems like Seraphin or Butler are the main options, and there's large stretches where that's really hurt the team in 4 to 5 minutes. Is that just a product of the reserves needing to be better? How much of that blame goes on Wittman? But then some nights, for example, where he'll pull Beal early and so he can have Beal later, and then you'll ask him a question and he'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Beal played 35 minutes. I'm like, no. We're talking about like this pattern of. So I don't know how much it is of him just. Tonight he just puts it in on a whim, or I know that he's thinking about it more, how much he just doesn't want to tell the media, but he really sometimes comes across like he's like amazed by the question I'm talking about. I'm like, no, remember when you took him out, 5-6 minutes earlier than you normally take him out? Like, why did you do that? And he does not want to answer those type of questions. So I don't know how much is that his plan, or how much that is just, how he used to just throw in Jan Vesely and Chris Singleton in the game once every 2 weeks for no apparent real reason. Right? Like, I don't know.
Well, I think part of it is, I think sometimes it's easy to rely on Butler. He's been shooting out of his mind lately, and I think that, sometimes Wittman sits on the bench and watches Butler, and with the occasional contribution from Seraphin and Beal running with the second unit, and he allows them to start off hot and get cold, and then when they get cold, it just totally breaks the momentum of the game, and by that time, the other team is back in the game, and it's like, part of that is, and again, we can get to this, part of that is we don't have the Andre Miller that we had last year. So there was a time when Andre Miller was running with the backup unit and Bradley Beal were running. You felt pretty confident about that backcourt. Andre Miller is declining and is putting more strain on Beal and Butler, who shouldn't be relied upon to do anything. Anything you get from him is gravy. And it's just messing up the momentum of the second unit. And I guess Wittman doesn't want to put Wall back in prematurely or doesn't want to put Pierce back in with the second unit. So the rotation is, it's not all Miller's fault, but he's not the player he was last year. And so I think that's thrown off Wittman too.
What do you see, and Kyle's kind of mentioned this, how do you see where Wittman has been recently switching the Porter and the Webster minutes? They're basically playing the same minutes. One guy will play, one game won't. He's kind of been alternating back and forth. And I think there might be a piece coming up on our site soon kind of maybe debating, Otto's playing time. And I know Webster, I think, he showed some little signs of life the last weekend. He still isn't the Martell as before, but I think he's showing that, here he comes, and we know how much Wittman loves veterans. And so what is your take on that, of how he's kind of handled that situation, and also moving forward?
Well, I think that going into this season, I think you would agree with me, that was Otto Porter's job to lose. I think if he had come in and he had set the world on fire and he was playing well consistently, defending, scoring, doing the little things like he was in the summer league with his boy Glenn Rice Jr., we wouldn't even be having this discussion. All we would be talking about is, are we going to trade Webster? What are we going to do at Webster? And he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything of note consistently, and it kind of set up a situation where you're waiting for Webster to come back, wondering what he can do. And Webster has proven what he can do when he's healthy, and that's Otto Porter's fault. I don't blame Wittman for wanting to see what Webster can do, because Otto Porter left that opening, and it's been a little disappointing to see that he hasn't capitalized on that momentum from the summer league. Some games he comes in and he looks like he lets the game come to him. He gets his hands everywhere. He hits the open shot. In other games, I forget who on our site said this, he looks unathletic. He looks slow. He just looks like the game is passing him by. And you can say a lot of things about Webster, how his shot isn't back, but he hustles. He's always in there, at least trying to make a play. And with Otto Porter, I just don't see that. So if I'm a coach and my third round is doing the job better than Webster when healthy, and proven that he can hit the jumper and play hard, why not give him a chance? That's Otto Porter's fault, not Coach Wittman. That's one of the few things I don't fault Wittman on.
Yeah, I think you're correct. And there's some nights where I see the instincts of Otto, where I see him, make the right pass, make the right defensive play, go to the right area. He'll kind of fill up the stat sheet with some rebounds and some assists, and make the extra pass and play where he kind of sees the game. But there's another time where he gets the pass, he's just too damn weak, man. I mean, it's like he gets the pass, and it should be an and one, and instead it's he either fumbles the ball or he gets fouled, but he doesn't get it in, and how much of that he really just needs to get back in the weight room. And then also I think the other glaring thing that I think ties into why Butler took his minutes, why the team is waiting for Webster to produce, is his inability to hit the corner three. I mean, this offense is designed around John Wall creating corner threes, transition threes, and I mean that's pretty much the main ingredient of this, secondary offense or fast break offense. Aside from Nene and Gortat, maybe some the pick and roll towards the hoop, that is the bread and butter of this offense. And if you're not a guy that can be able to do that on a consistent basis, I mean, those minutes are just going to go to somebody else until they can find someone else who can and allow other options, because you keep the threes. Now, there are people listening to this, which we'll get in. Maybe once again, I'm going to keep previewing things we're going to talk about later, but to talk about why the Wizards aren't shooting enough threes. Right? Because that's another criticism of this offense: too many twos and not enough threes. But the fact remains is that Wall created, that was the main ingredients of their success last year. It's they I think they're number one in most assisted buckets in the NBA. Then Atlanta were 1 and 2 last time I checked, and all because of John Wall. He makes it all go, and Butler and Porter's deficiency in this thing has and it sucks, because I think that he's a number 3 pick, and there's people out there, I've gotten arguments to say, hey, we're sacrificing the future, or for the future for the present by giving Butler all this time. But I think someone would agree, if it's someone that watches this game on a day-to-day night, it's at some point, this isn't we're not running a field day participation ribbon, right? I think Kyle has mentioned that, made that. This is bottom line. Wittman wants to win. This team wants to go far, and if you're not able to contribute on a day-to-day basis, I mean, sorry, you're just not going to play. Do you agree with that? I mean, I know that people will be like studying growth, but
No, that's a great point. There are nights when, if you look at the minutes of the starters, Wittman plays the starting five almost 40 minutes, between 35 and 40 minutes a game, especially like that OKC game, games he really wants to win and makes a statement. And I think that he knows that he has to win this year for various reasons. And if Otto Porter is not helping you win, this isn't fourth grade where everybody has to play a certain set of minutes. If you're not producing, if you're not living up to your potential as the number 3 pick, then you're out of here. I mean, Bradley Beal, as hard as I am on him this year for not being aggressive enough, he proved his worth in the playoffs, and he's proved his worth at different points to justify that number 3 pick. Otto Porter not only is making us miss Ariza, but there are players on the bench between Butler and
Martell.
I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, Martell, who are just more worthy of his minutes. So, it was his job to lose. The momentum of the summer had everyone thinking, okay, this is going to be his job. He looks more confident. Last year he wasn't in the weight room. He just was a little unsure of himself. He doesn't have an excuse this year, and one could argue it's easier for him this year because there's more talent on the team. There are more places for him to hide and to just focus on one thing, and he can't even do that. And the corner 3 is huge. That's how Russell Butler's eating. He sits in the corner, he's hitting the shot, and he hits it consistently. And Butler's kind of SOL, but we still have the second part of the season. We have after the All-Star break, so all is not lost quite yet.
Yeah, and I don't want to be overly harsh because I'm sure there's some Georgetown fans who are listening to this about Otto to do well. I think everyone wants to do Otto to do well, and I'm not saying to ship him out because I think his rookie season was kind of lost, and he showed some promise in summer league. But I think that the Wizards franchise does not have the luxury of just giving minutes in the rotation to a guy because he was a third pick anymore. You know what? We did that under Flip. They did that under things where guys were given minutes that they didn't deserve them. And this was I think that, to be fair, I don't think that Porter's was never screwed over here. I think he was given, like you said, given this opportunity, and he didn't take advantage.
No.
It has to be on him more so than us saying like, oh, he was a third pick, so we should give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he really needs another offseason in the weight room. He needs to maybe go to summer league again, potentially. I don't know if he will, but
right.
I mean, we'll have to because we'll have nobody, but because we'll probably trade all our draft picks. There's a zing for anyone that knows what's up. It'll be Tomas, who doesn't want to come, so we'll have nobody on the roster. But what I'm saying is that I think that maybe that he's maybe, he's still on a contract. I don't see them getting rid of his contract after this season. I don't see them really giving up on him yet to add another piece. I think that I would be against that move as well. I think you still allow him one more offseason, another year, 3 years in the NBA. I think that's good. And you've kind of seen, what you've seen with Austin Rivers being traded after 3 years. Now you've kind of seen a couple other who's another guy in the same draft that was already they already given up on, drawing a blank right now, where I think that you wait a little bit. I think 2 years is a little bit too soon for Otto, but I don't think that we should, I don't think we should make a big deal about it. We're going to move on real quick. So the Wizards they played in Portland on Saturday night, lost a close one, won on Sunday night in Denver, and had in overtime, and lost in Oklahoma City last week, a game I was actually at covering. One of the things that has been kind of a glaring theme recently, and kind of one of the things we mentioned a little bit earlier about how now we can talk about just kind of some mini meta things, is that the late game execution. I know there's some people online cause conversation that where it just ends up being one of the jokes, the running joke, is that they see women run and call up all these plays, and then it ends up being wall ISO for 20 seconds. I know that drives many fans crazy, and I think you have some pointed opinions on this topic. So talk to me.
Yes, it drives me crazy. I just want to curse, but I won't do that. This is a family show. But I think all you had to do is look at the last minute or so of the OKC game. The reason why OKC can do ISOs for Russell Westbrook is that, number one, he hits the jumper with more regularity than John Wall. So if Russell Westbrook is coming down the court, you have to play off of him a little bit because he can hit that pull-up jumper in the blink of an eye. He can also get to the rim. It's that versatility that makes him dangerous. Not to mention, he has Durant somewhere hovering, waiting to get the ball. So it makes sense, if I'm Scott Brooks, to call an ISO play for Russell Westbrook because there are so many options, so many variables. John Wall is not the offensive player that Russell Westbrook is. Nobody respects his jumper, even though it's better. It's not deadly. It's not. He doesn't hit it with any degree of regularity. Number one. Number two, if you watch enough of the Wizards, you know that first quarter through the third quarter, when Wall drives, he's a threat to kick it or to shoot it. But all of a sudden, at the end of the game, assists are not an option. It's like he makes a beeline to the basket and forces a shot, and it's terrible. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. He airballed a shot against OKC. So if your strength is, if you're leading the league in assists, and your strength is getting the ball to the rim and making passes to Gortat or to Butler at impossible angles, why all of a sudden do you morph into Kobe and think that it's score or bust? It's completely asinine. And, Randy Wittman, who's a Bobby Knight disciple, has to know that passing the ball is always going to be better than going to the rim. And I don't know whether John Wall just, pulls a Kobe or a LeBron and just says, forget the coach, I'm doing what I want, or whether there's no real structure. But it seems to me, God bless Sam Cassell, he wouldn't let that happen. That just would not happen in a different environment. So it frustrates me that when you're watching the game at the end of every quarter, all of a sudden John Wall is Joe Johnson, and it blows my mind. I was sitting at the game with Connor one time, and he was like, "Here comes the ISO," and that's what happened. And so it seems to me that you know your personnel well enough that you come up with some kind of different play. Maybe have Wall play off the ball or give it to someone else, but do something a little different. Because what happens is the end of the quarter execution is so poor, and when you get in a tight game, it shows up. And that's what happened against OKC, against Portland, and Denver. They relied on that ISO play, which doesn't work. There was no passing, there was no moving, no cutting, and they lose the game. So I guess, I'm sorry to go on and on about this, but how many times do you have to watch them at the end of the game to know that this shit does not work?
Yeah, it was actually a funny tidbit is that the last few shots I remember that did work was like a running three-pointer against Oklahoma City, and then there was a shot against Portland, which was a wild shot out of bounds that he tossed up. Both of those went in, but when it's the Nuggets game on the line, we can run the whole shot clock down. He starts too early, gets stripped. Now he says later he gets fouled, which everyone says he's fouled. He was stripped. Results in a run out. They should have lost the game on this play. So the reason we want to bring this up is that it's Oklahoma City, it's tie game, Wall goes ISO. From my vantage point, I thought it was in. Of course, everyone's like, oh my God, that was an air ball. It wasn't close. I was on the other side of the end. Portland game, they broke down a couple times. They actually had more breakdowns by leaving Wesley Matthews open for three for some godful awesome reason. He has the most made three-pointers in the NBA. They leave him open twice. And they fouled Miles Leonard, which I thought was kind of a bullshit call. But more so than the ISOs. But Denver, once again, they should have lost the game on that. And I think it comes down to is there any action being run? Is this where's the place for Bradley Beal? Is the only time we run a play for Bradley Beal is if it's 0.5 seconds left? Now they did, to be fair, they did run some type of play for Paul Pierce for the game winner after they got bailed out and Fareed missed 2 free throws after Wall got stripped, and they ran.
Yeah, but even Paul Pierce thinks they should run through Nene.
Yeah. Oh, this is true. I don't know why they don't run through Nene. They should run some type of action. They should run some type of pick and roll with Nene. They should post Nene up. They should get Wall going to the hoop. And I think but there was an instance where, and it's kind of funny, is that you do see Wall making these plays. He did tie the game up against OKC, right? I think 30, 40 seconds left. He did tie it up against Denver. So you see him going to the hoop. I think the one that really caused the thing is if he goes to the hoop and doesn't get a foul call, or even the Denver play if there was some attack towards the hoop where he's making a positive mistake, but when he's just dribbling around and just goes step back because he wants to be, like you said, Joe Johnson or Kobe, or just wants to have the walk off, and then you're well, okay, that is where's the strengths? When else do you do that? Very randomly, especially with how well his floater has developed. We've seen, and some of these moves to the hoop. His body is torque. I don't think I don't have the stats in front of me. He hasn't been getting on the free throw line as much as I think he should. Obviously, Bradley Beal should be getting a lot of it. Well, I mean, what? So I guess going back into what type of action would you like to see the Wizards run at the end of the games?
I mean, I listen to Paul Pierce. I will go through Nene. Nene is a great passer. He's been unstoppable in the post as of late. Just run it through him. You can have cutters. You can have Wall, Beal, Butler. I just think you run it through Nene. But if you want the ball in Wall's hands, I mean, why not spread everybody out and have him actually pass the ball? I think, and again, maybe we're being too hard on Wittman, and we're not being hard enough on the decision making of Wall because he's not a scorer. He's not. He's quick as hell, and he can get to the rim, but he's not a scorer. And if you watch, like I said before, in the first three quarters, when he drives, he'll almost pass up a shot to find Gortat or to find somebody cutting or to find somebody open in the corner. What's wrong with that at the end of the game? Why not make everybody on the floor and play? Why not look for Beal in the corner or look for a cutting Gortat? Just do something so that if he drives the lane, finds a cutting Gortat, what are the chances Gortat's going to get fouled in the lane? They're pretty high. He doesn't shoot off balance. He's going to the rim. As you alluded to, the problem with Wall is he gets to the lane, or he shoots an impossible shot, and he's not going to get a foul call. So I think he just has to make up his mind that an assist is not a bad thing. You can still be the hero with an assist, but trying to score, putting your head down like you're LeBron or like you're 6'5", 230 pounds, it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked. And someone, I don't know whether it'll be Pierce or someone needs to pull him aside and say, look, you're an assist man. That's how you're going to make your bread and butter. That's how you're going to win the game, making a crucial assist. Maybe he can practice against the Lakers tonight.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm sure Nick Young will let him go right to the hoop. So Aggie P, even though he just says, give me the ball. And we're not going to talk about the Lakers game because I might go off on a whole 30-minute rant about Nick Young, and I've done that before. So I can reference you to 3 episodes ago. But what I want to say is that I think you mentioned is maybe a little bit. It seems like Wall isn't getting as many fouls, and he kind of talked about it after the OKC game, and he kind of mentioned how KD was getting the calls and he wasn't. I don't know if I really saw some of that. So maybe is this a part? I'm just kind of throwing a theory at it. Is this part where he doesn't think he's getting the calls, so then he just kind of like does the step back instead? I mean, is it something that you think he's thinking about like that, or is it just him being frustrated because he, thought he got hit a couple of times and KD gets touched and they call a foul?
I mean, I think he was frustrated. I mean, look, John Wall is all-star for the second year in a row, but KD gets calls that very few players in the league get anyway. So he can't expect to be on KD's level. He's a point guard. He's not it's just different. I don't think that's not what a leader does, especially not a game like that where basically your inability to get to the ball. Well, first you shot an air ball on one end, and then you let Westbrook drive right past you on the other end. That's the kind of game where you just have to step up and say that's my fault and don't worry about the calls. Wall isn't at that point where he can complain about calls, especially when he's not being as aggressive and getting to the lane as he normally is in years past.
Yeah, I guess that we've been focusing so much on the offensive end. I think the defensive end in that OKC loss was I don't know. Westbrook got the ball, went straight in. Wall didn't help. Pierce was lost in the middle of the lane. For some reason, Beal decided to jump way in the backcourt with only a few seconds left in the game, which made absolutely no sense. It was a complete breakdown from those 3 players, but then it was also Wall was so worried about Deion Waiters in the corner, he didn't even step in and try to take a charge when he's the leader of the team charge board. I don't know. I forget what he's up to now. Or he'll take that charge in the second or third quarter, but he didn't in that situation. I don't know if anyone actually asked him that question. That's kind of a tough one to ask, like, what the hell are you doing? But that's actually what a lot of people were like. They like, especially with the angle from underneath the hoop, it looks even more egregious, where he just like is standing there like a statue, and the hoop could fly right by him. But I think maybe he thought Pierce was going to stop him. I don't know. It happened so fast. I mean, that's the other thing. Sometimes people forget. But I want to defend.
But in fairness, Wall should have been on Westbrook.
Yeah, well, I think it's because Wall had 5 fouls, right? That's what someone told me, and that was why. But I still think that who cares about that in that situation?
Yeah, that was true. Right.
But I think that I want your opinion real quickly because I don't want to talk about this, but since we've mentioned OKC, and I did a 30-minute show with Ben Standig. I should watch me and him ramble on for 30 minutes on the same channel here. KD to DC, your thoughts real quickly. I'd like them on the record because unless they play in the NBA Finals, I really don't want to talk about this issue. I am actually working on a piece from that game. I'm working on a Rasul Butler piece and a Kevin Durant piece, and I just kind of want to get it all out there and then just kind of move on. I need your thoughts real quick. The whole hoopla, what it is, just your general. Give me a sports hot take. Your feeling assessment. This whole deal. I don't even know. I need a word for it. I don't know.
For
Kevin Durant.
KD?
Yeah, the KD to DC movement, the hoopla, the pressure, the media, the fans, just all of it. His general loving of his hometown. I mean, there's.
I mean, look, I'm not stupid. I can understand the appeal of him coming back to play, especially since, if you fantasize about Wall, Beal, and Durant, I mean, they seem like they would never lose. But I just have never seen an example of someone coming home and just setting shit on fire. It just doesn't happen like that. And I think fans just want to see what they want to see. They want to see him come home. They want to see him, go to Berry Farm. All that stuff that fans want to see. But looking at LeBron right now and looking at certain players when they go home, it's a lot of pressure. Every night you have, I'm exaggerating, but you have millions of ticket requests, and then you're expected to win a championship.
91
say it again?
91 the other day. That's how many tickets he had to get for the game. 91.
Right, and I think that he doesn't know what that kind of pressure is. And OKC, as I heard him say before on his, I think it was an HBO documentary, nobody bothers him in OKC. I mean, they respect the fact that he's a superstar, but he can go to the grocery store, and maybe 3 or 4 people will come up to him. He's still a normal human being. Where if he's here, everywhere he goes, he's Michael Jackson. There's people mobbing him and saying, KD, and you're the savior. And that's just, we don't know how much pressure that is, especially considering we don't know how it's going to end in OKC. Like, is it going to be a disappointing season? Is he going to win a title? I just think, and maybe this is the rational me talking, not a fan, but as a little more analytical person, I just think that psychologically that changes your game. Every night you're expected to be Michael Jordan, and you're expected to do it in your hometown. So I don't want to pay attention to it. I just want to let it happen organically, and whatever happens, happens. So that's the rational me talking. The irrational me says, hell yeah, I want him here. I want to go to a locker room every night where, it's Bill over here. Like the 2010 Lakers, when you walk into the locker room and it's like, oh shit, do I talk to Derek Fisher? Do I talk to Gasol? Do I talk to Kobe, Artest? I want to be in that kind of locker room where it doesn't matter where I go, there's somebody to talk to. But the rational me is trying to say, listen, right, Lamar Odom, God bless his soul. But I just think it's a lot of pressure, and I think that we're not. Number one, I think we need to appreciate what we have right now, even without KD. We have Wall and Beal. We have one of the best backcourts. I think to praise or to wish for KD too much is doing a disservice to the talent we already have on the floor. But two, keeping on that, we don't know how close Durant and Westbrook are. And we don't know how he's going to feel about being pulled away from Westbrook. I mean, they've been together for a while. There's just a lot of moving parts here that's a little more complex than I want KD home. Take us to the promised land.
Mm-hmm. No, I think my feelings are well out there, but I think that you're correct in the sense that Kevin is a really humble dude, man. I think that's what his appeal is for people to meet him, and he's not, I don't want to rip on LeBron because I really don't know him personal. But I see how LeBron's entourage and his people, the Four Horsemen, and his marketing team and his branding deal. And not to say that KD doesn't have something, but just the whole thing of LeBron and even how Kobe acts and how his distance. And maybe that's just Kobe that what's developed over him. But with Durant, his kid's he just wants to play some hoops and a pickup game. Literally, he really does. I know that's a cliche. But he just kind of wants to root on the Redskins and hang out with some boys and go to a club and just chill or go, talk to his people and hang out. Like he doesn't come across as this like that he would feed off the attention, to feed off being the savior. Or, some people would want that attention. But I do think that there is a genuine appeal to this. Like you said, I mean, from his standpoint, I don't want to put thoughts in his words. I think that the thing that I say on this, and I keep saying I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but I'm going to just finish this point, is that no, it's this prematureness that me having this conversation as someone who covers the Wizards on a day-to-day basis, going from 5-28, going from the depths of Gilbert in the dealing with JaVale McGee, Shaq, and a Fool every night, dealing with Nick Young on a day-to-day basis, like going through this bad basketball and just the litany of players that have been revolved through for years and years and years. And here all of a sudden you have a team that's tied for fifth, the fifth best record in the NBA, and we're talking about free agencies from a year and a half from now. Like that's what there's more attention on that, right? Last week than there is on the actual good basketball team. Now I know a lot of that is nationally been drawn. I know it's barbershop talk.
Yeah, but
you disagree?
But how many teams legitimately can say? How many teams legitimately can say they can get KD? I mean, if we're on the short list right now, he's not going to Chicago. He's not going to LA. Hell no, he's not going to LA. I mean, the Knicks will probably make a play at him, but it'll be out of desperation because they really don't have a lot. So if you're taking, even if KD wasn't from DC, I mean, it's still a logical fit. So you add that element to it. It's not like it's wishful thinking for DC fans to want him to come home. I mean, it makes a lot of basketball sense. And there aren't a lot of places he can go. He can stay in OKC, or he can go to another team and it's not a good fit. And he can be looking like Kobe is now, where it's one man asking, somebody asking him to be the savior. So it makes sense for him to come here. I just worry about the intangibles.
No, I think you're right. And I think Ben Sandberg, he made that exact point, is that this is a different team. I mean, this is, regardless of that he is from here, from here puts it in a different, up the notch. But even if he's from LA, is he going to go back to the crappy Lakers, right? I mean, if he's from, is Wall going back to Charlotte right now? Are we talking about him, Wall going back to Charlotte? That's what I was thinking about the other day. But, where it's like, or going to the Sixers to save them, or Milwaukee if he was from there. Like Caron Butler, say if he's Caron Butler from Milwaukee, he's going to go save them, something like that. But I think that the way the Wizards have set up, especially with
that's not quite the same.
Yeah, it's totally different. I'm running out of where these players are from. You know what I'm saying? Like where it's like that even if those situations were, yes, he's one of the best players in the world, who wouldn't want him? But I think that what he's trying to say is that Wall and Beal and those two young players have made this an enticing choice. Aside from, and I think that your point is about. The other thing about, let me just tell you a real quick story about Durant. Is so the scene around him before the game. I tried to get in there, and David Aldridge, your boy David Aldridge, he starts it all off, and he's like, "Oh, I just want to let you guys know, Kevin, let's just get this out of the way, real quick. What do you think of the Heat's uniforms last night?" and like everyone's sitting there, you're waiting for Durant to react, right? So Durant reacts, he laughs. Kind of cuts the ice a little bit, and my favorite part is like how aggressive the TV reporter guys are on these questions, right? They just keep asking like over and over, like they're all there. They want that little 10-second soundbite where I'm scared as hell to ask any. If you ask one question about this, then you're done. I mean, there's one dude, I forget what channel he's from, but he asked like the same question like 3.5 times. I didn't ask a question before, but afterwards I asked a question. I was like, aside from your friends, their family, what do you miss about the area? And he just didn't really have an answer. He just said, "Yeah, good execution." Whoa, it's funny you say that because that's the dude right next to me. And so then he gets showered up, and we interview Russell Westbrook, and I was totally terrified to ask him a question, even though I was going to ask him about the Paul Pierce thing that he did, and I totally chickened out on it. I kind of feel bad. I should have asked him. But then Kevin Durant comes back in, and I was like, "Hey, we're off camera," and I go to him, I was like, "Hey, man, like, what I was trying to ask you is, like, do you miss half smokes? Do you miss mumbo sauce? Like, what do you miss? Like, what do you miss about being around home?" He's like, he tells me a whole story about how he doesn't like mumbo sauce. He likes his chicken wings like this way and that. And then he started asking me where I live. And he was telling me all these stories about, like, I don't know. It seemed like growing up he didn't really leave PG County very much. It's pretty much what it came down to. My PG County knowledge is kind of. I can tell you all these neighborhoods in D.C., but I haven't spent much time in PG County. But I mean, he's literally talking to us. The coolest part about it is he was talking to me and this dude about like we're human beings, like we're shooting the shit about like, where do you know? Where do you been? I've been here. I've been there. And just like, I can't think of any other NBA star that would get in that type of conversation. I don't know, especially just to some random dudes outside his locker. Like it was like a normal like, wow, he's looking in your eye. Like he was like, where do you live? He asked me where I live, dude. I was like, what? You talking to me? Right. Which, and I think that's kind of like a mini story I'm going to write about it that, which I think going back to your point would be kind of cool to cover him on a day-to-day basis from a selfish reason, aside from being the second best basketball player. Let's go to the real best basketball player real quick.
Well, that's part of the deal.
Yeah, and it's legitimate. I mean, it's pretty true. John Wall going to start in the All-Star game. We need to talk about this. One of the leading vote getters. Last year, he made his first All-Star appearance. Now he's a starter. Kind of excited that he has reached that prominent level where the fans are recognizing things. It's also guaranteed. I haven't really read anything of anyone saying, "Oh my God, he's not deserving." That people like to do that every year. Now there's been some hiccups here and there, that Teague and stuff like that, but no one's been like, oh, like Carmelo's starting, like he shouldn't start, something like that, or when Kobe was going to start. Your thoughts of John Wall also real quick, and just this kind of new accomplishment that he's made this season.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, like we talked about earlier, it's one thing when you're not expected to make it and you kind of outperform, but I think going into this season, we kind of assumed that he was going to make the All-Star team. He was expected to do great things. He was no longer an up-and-comer, especially off last year's playoff performance. So to see him kind of fulfill that promise, it is a big deal. I mean, we, as Wizards fans, can't take for granted that a player on our team is starting in the All-Star game. That's still a little surreal. I mean, Gilbert made the All-Star team, but you just never got the sense that going in, Gilbert was the best player at his position in the NBA and was deserved to start. So that's still a little surreal. And part of your agenda note, you asked, should anybody else have made it, and the answer is no. I mean, there are players having nice years, like Rasul Butler and Nene and Gortat are playing well, but the Wizards haven't earned the right to have someone make the All-Star game on reputation alone. Pierce's reputation is with the Celtics. Nobody else has done anything of note. So maybe you can put Butler in the three-point contest or Beal in the three-point contest or something. But Wall is starting, and he should be the only player to make it. So I'm happy for him.
Yeah, I agreed. I think that his popularity has risen. Just the way that he has become a national prominent figure. And sometimes we live in this bubble of covering them that we forget. And sometimes it's good to see how he's perceived on the outside. Usually it's negatively, unfortunately, which is a whole other argument. I don't know why. But this year, there's no negativity. Yeah, aside from him, or go down the list, Feinstein, or go down the list of all the people that have tried to hate John Wall for some bizarre reasons, which I still don't understand. But having more national TV games this season, the clip with Maya, the emotional breakdown, which I'll mention again, I think that kind of elevated him to your average fan. He went on an Asian tour this summer as well, which I think kind of got him a little bit more international appeal. He went with Adidas and went to a bunch of countries, to help with those votes. I would say, I guess my argument for someone being on another additional player is the 30 and 15, second in the East. It probably should deserve to get two, right? I know what you're saying. Like, there's no real maybe deserving to. Yeah. But as like the second best team, I think that, do you give one to the best player on the 10th best team, or do you give two on the second best team? That's just, I think, the argument. I think it's really hard to make an argument for Beal or Gortat as like they're like the top 10 or 15 players in the East. But I think if you go from like a team-centric view, I think you can make one. I think Shaq actually made the argument the other day that Beal and Gortat should be on it. I think I would argue with Gortat. I think he received the fourth most votes for forwards, which is kind of crazy.
You didn't just quote Shaq, did you?
I think Gortat should make it. I didn't call it Shaq. I just said Shaq said that both of those guys should make it the other day.
Okay.
I do think that the Hawks should. I think the Hawks should probably have four players. Millsap, Teague.
Yeah.
Horford and even Korver, I think, probably is deserving maybe over a second Wizard. I think that's probably the argument we're going. I'm probably totally fine with that. But if we're going to make an argument in the context of the second best team maybe deserves a second player, I would say, I think Gortat would probably be mine, just from numbers alone and defense. I would probably go with Nene is probably. But then the hard part about that is for a Wizards fan, I think Nene is more important to the team than Gortat is, and I think that's where you get. That's where you get a little slippery on this argument. I can't get really pumped up for it because logically I'm watching these games and I'm like, without Gortat, they close a lot of times without Gortat. When they go small, it's because he's on the bench. And if you're going to say he belongs deserved, but I think as an entire what he brings and his ability to bring it every night for the most part, and his size. And I think if you had the positions the way they used to be, he would probably be the center, one of the centers. And I know they got rid of center. And I think that kind of hurts his chances. I mean, all those years, like, what, Zougauskas would make it? They'd have, like, I think Ocean Tag, no, I think maybe made it 1 year. I think what I think is going. Right. Real quick, we'll skip over the offense. What do you, also, just to add in that Beal is not going to be in the three-point contest, Wall is not in the dunk contest, and Wall and Curry are going to have a horse shooting contest. I don't know if you're aware of that. Any thoughts on this horse contest? And why is he going to play horse against Steph Curry? Is he going to try to do dunks or floaters? Because I think he's pretty much screwed any other way.
Again, just like Wall at the end of the game thinking he's Jordan, I think Wall is kind of overplaying his hand here. I think Curry is, Wall is the perfect setup man. Curry is the kind, him and Durant are the guys you don't want to play horse with. They look like they have every trick shot in the book. So, I admire that. If I made my first All-Star game as a starter, I'd be talking a little shit too to any and everybody. So, I don't fault him for that.
Yeah, I think it's sponsored through like a deodorant company or something. So I think there's like money involved here.
Right.
And it's All-Star. Sure, Wall's got a bunch of trick shot planned, and he's probably just going to go out like that, right? Like, Curry's probably not just going to go shoot a three-pointer, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be, like, they're not going to go on the big stage and just, because I think Wall is screwed. Now, I do think that this is, not good for him. I mean, he's not going to challenge Curry's not going to be like, hey, Wall, let's do a dunk contest, right? It's like, hey, Curry, let's do a shooting.
No, there's no fool.
So, but I think
Curry's going to stay in his lane. He knows who he is. He's a magician with the ball. I don't want to see that. Yeah, I'd rather see Wall in the dunk contest than the horse.
In the horse contest, yeah. I mean, yeah. Beal. I mean, the three-point people all deserved it over Beal. So I didn't really have any problems with that. My thing with Beal, and this is what I want to talk about, is so Kyle. We'll close this out on this. So Kyle had a thing. So today. Bradley Beal was asked about the three-point contest, so Bradley Beal shoots. He's one of the top. I think he's fifth or sixth in three-point percentage, and for some reason he likes to shoot a lot of twos. So he was said today, quoted with Jorge Castillo of the Washington Post. Bradley Beal, I just feel comfortable getting to the mid-range and pulling up sometimes. Sometimes I do wish I would shoot more threes, though. Which that quote did not go around a lot. For those not aware, the Wizards shoot the highest percentage of threes in the NBA, but shoot some of the fewest in the league. I asked Wittman this quote, or asked him about this. He basically kind of said that they don't have enough guys that shoot threes, and that they kind of just take the open shots where they come. Of course, then they go to Oklahoma City and shoot, I think, 5 for 25 for three-pointers. I think the next week after this. I thought it was kind of funny. Before we get into the Bradley Beal quotes and kind of some numbers on him, just this whole philosophy argument, the long twos, do we make too much of it? How much is Wittman right on this? I mean, they don't have a reason, like we said. Martell has been hurt. They have two big guys where he was basically saying that they have two big guys a lot. A lot of other teams have fours that can shoot. He was giving Atlanta as an example where pretty much everyone can shoot threes on their team. How much is it of that, or how much is it the design of the offense where these are the shots, or like a lot of critics say, which I somewhat kind of agree with to a certain extent, is, well, the defense wants you to shoot the 22-footer, and you can generally shoot it. Like, this is their game plan. Like, run them off the corners, run them off the wings, keep Wall limited in transition, and make them shoot those long twos.
Look, when the San Antonio Spurs came to town, I think it was either David Aldridge or Kyle. One of the two asked Popovich about the long twos, and Popovich basically said the long twos, just shoot a long two is the dumbest shot that you can shoot. If you're all the way out there, why not look down, see where your feet are, and take a three-pointer? And this is the World Championship Spurs coach saying that, and so that's something that your coach has to ingrain in you. Like if you're long twos, it's maddening to see, and if Greg Popovich can see it, surely everyone else can see it. I don't think that you get a pass. That Bradley Beal comment kind of sounds borderline lazy. Like take a step back, take a three-pointer. So I think that starts from the top. I think that's a philosophy that Wittman and the assistant coaches have to kind of bang into their players because, again, to quote Greg Popovich, he hates the three-point shot. He thinks it's not basketball. He thinks it's not pure basketball, but he says you cannot win without it, even though Byron Scott thinks you can. You can't win without it. And so, I think that has to be a philosophy. You have players like Bradley Beal and Martell, Webster, and Russell Butler who shoot it so well. A long two is not acceptable. It's like you're cheating yourself. So that's the philosophy change that has to be ingrained into the players.
Yeah, it's funny. So after that quote, Kyle decided to run the numbers. According to NBA, Bradley Beal is shooting 32.5% for mid-range, 44% from
I saw that.
With 3 of 50 players that have attempted 160 more shots from mid-range. Bradley Beal is shooting 32%. It is the second worst in the whole NBA. So his point is just like, of course, he makes a little snarky, comfortable comment because that's what Bradley Beal just says. I feel comfortable. Now he got a little pushback. He actually said, so even for more context, we're killing John Wall sometimes on these mid-range shots. John Wall actually shoots 8% better from mid-range than Beal does. Jared Jack shoots 10% better. Kyrie Irving shoots 15% better. And so his point is that
the end of the game.
Yeah, so he's just like, what are you doing with these shots? And there's a shot that that Kyle that he shared where it was against the Nuggets the other day. And I think the point is about the long twos is that I somewhat agree with Wittman in the sense that you play ball, right? You get a shot, you pump fake, you dribble in, the defense is there, you can't really drive, you got an open look, shoot it, right? Like that's a good shot. The other ones is when he's just kind of like, I don't really want to drive, there's an open lane, I'm too lazy to step back maybe or something, I'm just gonna fire it, right? Or he comes off that double screen on the top of the key, takes one dribble in, contested two. That's the one that drives me nuts. Now, obviously, there's something going wise where they're coming off these curls, and why is the team running? Why are these shots open from a? I mean, it's the bottom line. Why is your team shooting more mid-range twos than anyone in the NBA for the last 2 years running? I mean, that's just the facts, right? I mean, like the stats prove that, and when they statistically say that's the worst shot, it's really hard to make these nuanced arguments that I'm trying to make, right? So where I'm trying to say, like, when you watch a game, like, where you're like, you watch a game, you say, like, oh, you took 8 mid-range shots. But if I watch it, I'd be like, 4 of those were okay, right? You know what I mean? Like where it's like, oh, you took a 3, but I'm all happy about the 3, but then I watched the 3 and I thought that was a terrible shot. So there is some of that, but there's something else going on that Wittman won't allow.
There is. I mean, look.
Right?
Three of the best teams in the league right now are Golden State, the Hawks, and you can even throw in the Spurs, even though they're not playing well. They always seem to whip the ball around the perimeter, whip it inside, and there's always a player wide open for a 3. Not a long 2, but a 3. And they're relentless in moving around the ball until a player is open. That's a philosophy. That's something that's ingrained in you by the coach. Let's keep moving the ball until we get a wide open 3. And when you watch the Hawks, and especially Golden State play, it's like they're getting wide open shots. That's the philosophy. They're not shooting long 2s and missing. They're shooting wide open 3s and nailing them. And I think that goes back to coaching, because you can't tell me the Wizards don't have the personnel to do that, right? I mean, they have plenty of guys who can shoot the 3. It's just not something that maybe it's in the analytics and Wittman is not seeing it. You think that could be it?
I mean, I've had
I don't
conversations.
know what it is, but it's.
I've had personal conversations with the analytic guys. Like they're pretty much giving him the numbers, right? And they're conveying the numbers. And what he kind of told me, the guy with the team, is like they'll kind of convey the numbers to the player. So they'll say, oh, this team's better rebound than you, but in reality, like they're not that good at rebound percentage, or like so then they'll use the analytics in a way to motivate them wherever it takes to, like, the message the coaching staff is trying to make. But they do use these numbers. They do have data. They're studying these trends, especially over, they kind of told me they look at 10 to 20 game trends, half season trends, and those are the things that they really kind of like, those numbers that they kind of importance, and that makes sense. And the thing is like, but that comes back to my point. Like when you say like they don't have the personnel, I mean they're shooting the highest percentage in the NBA. Like no one shoots the three better than them. But yet Bradley Beal is so far behind Kyle Korver, and so far behind Courtney Lee, and so far behind Wesley Matthews, an amount of makes and takes of 3-pointers. That's where the frustration of Wizards Twitter, Wizards fans, anyone who wants to look at these numbers, NBA fans. I mean, there's criticism happening from writers out there of this point, and whenever there's a quote like this one from Beal, or whenever there's something that it just kind of, it's like a fuel of it, but it doesn't take away from the merit of the argument that is true, and it is kind of maddening and frustrating. And that's especially the corner three, and that's where Rasul Butler, like you mentioned, I'm working on a piece on him, and he's shooting 54% from the corner, from threes. Mm-hmm. Still, even though he's shooting 39% this month, which he's cooled off, he's still shooting 54% overall from the corner three. And, it's like, why isn't Bradley Beal?
You have to respect it at this point.
Yeah, so why does he shoot three? The Lakers-Wizards games has started, but I want one final point I want to get to you. So this team, we've talked about the assessment. We've bitched about the long twos. We've nitpicked around Wendy. We've dumped on Andre Miller. We did give Chris Humphries some praise. So what's up, Chris? We dogged old man Paul Pierce. Kind of critiqued John Wall. Not that we're all negative, because I think this is coming from a place of completely different. But what do you see? How elite do you think this team is? And when I say elite, I hate that whole terminology, but the NBA I think is different, because I think the NBA, football's maybe getting a little bit of that, but NBA, it's like, the best team usually wins, win the playoffs. Like, with the 7 games are set up, college basketball, I can't really say the same. Major League Baseball is weird. Hockey's totally weird. Sometimes in football this year you can have, the 2-1 seeds, but there's only one game where NBA basketball, it just seems that, especially with injuries, unless one of your star players goes down, the good teams usually win. So you can kind of look at, say, 4 to 6 or 7 teams or championship contenders. Where do you see the Wizards ranked amongst the elite in the NBA, and what do you think that's missing for them to have? And I know that their goal really isn't to win a title per se, but there's tiers when it comes to the NBA, and I think winning the East is definitely realistic. So maybe we should just start with there. And how realistic do you think that they could win the East, and what do they need to win the East, and then to maybe move on to that next tier?
Well, I go back to a quote that LaMarcus Aldridge said when he hurt his thumb, and he wanted to test it, and he said, "I want to test it against a good team, a good physical team like the Wizards." I think that the biggest compliment you can pay the Wizards is that on any given night, they can beat anybody. So I don't know if that makes them elite, but it makes them a competitive team. I hesitate to say elite, because I think in a 7-game series, the Hawks and the Raptors would just torch them, and they'd lose in 5 games. There seems to be a bit of a gap in between the way the Raptors play, the way the Hawks play, and the way the Wizards play. So I still think they're behind those 2 teams in the East, and I don't think anybody looking at Cleveland right now, looking at Chicago, well, we're better than Chicago. Cross that out. But I don't know that they're elite just yet. I think they can win the East. I think they can beat anybody in the NBA, but they need to show a little more. And I'd venture to say they need a backup point guard, whether it's Calderon, as I saw Bullets Forever talked about today, or Nate Robinson. They just need something else off the bench that makes that second unit a little more feared. But I think right now they're right in that tier just below elite.
So you see them. Do you feel that the gap between them and the Hawks is that much? I mean, to me, I think the Raptors have really struggled over the last few weeks, and I think the Hawks. I mean, to me, the Hawks will never lose. And how much is this? I know the Wizards have not. They played the Raptors early in the year. I think the Raptors are kind of coming back to earth a little bit, but I do think that maybe. But we have seen over the last 2 years, and the reason I would maybe agree with you a little bit on the Raptors is that it's always been a bad matchup for the Wizards. They've either gotten smoked or they've had to win. So that's been a bad matchup. The Hawks has been a bad matchup for them as well too. The Bulls, they've obviously proven they can beat on a regular basis. The Cavs, aside from them being smoked, they beat them handily. The Cavs have their own defensive issues. I think that the Wizards would exploit, especially with Gortat and May. So I think that they're a bad matchup. But I think with the way the Raptors and the Hawks are able to spread the ball around, but it could be a little early. You never know what really happens in those two things. But is it really that big of a gap with the Grizzlies, the Warriors, even the Spurs? I don't even know if the Thunder, the Blazers maybe. I think those five. I don't really believe in the Clippers yet. I think the Rockets. I think the Rockets are probably legit as well. And the Wizards beat them on the road, but the West. I think there's five or six teams. And obviously, you can't count out the champs from the Spurs, but they're not playing as well. I think there's like 5 or 6 maybe out west, and in the East, we just say the Hawks. I know if Derrick Rose comes back to Derrick Rose, all the media is going to hop back on the Bulls bandwagon, and LeBron's still going to get LeBron, right? But in reality, I think that kind of funny is that the media is still going to probably still ride the Bulls and the Cavs, but from a basketball standpoint, maybe the Hawks and the Raptors are more of a scarier clubs, especially for the Wizards.
Right, and I don't think the Raptors are necessarily that good. They're just a bad matchup for the Wizards, as you said. But I think that the West. It's cliche to say, but I think the West is stronger, and they play each other a lot more often. They play good teams a lot more often, and I just don't think the Wizards are quite there yet. But there's nothing wrong with that. The Wizards don't have to be better than the West or than the Spurs and the Warriors. All they have to do is be better than 3 or 4 teams in front of them, and as we saw last year, the Wizards are made for a playoff series. I just think that they could beat the Cavs, they could beat the Bulls, but I think they would struggle against the Hawks and the Raptors. So I guess the key is to get a favorable seeding so they don't have to play them until later on in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So going back to the original question, is this really a sense of the West is just so much better? Or what does the Wizards really need to – is it just they need an upgrade at the backup point guard position? Do they need another big maybe? Do they need another three-point shooter? They have one roster spot left. Is that even? Doesn't it even matter? Do they need to play Blair more? Do they need to just play Webster more, like we mentioned earlier? What do you see? There's some move that they can make to kind of upgrade themselves. Kind of how they upgrade themselves with Drew Gooden last year. Al Harrington coming back from injury. Some little like hidden little thing that will maybe on second unit or maybe in a game 3 or 4 in a series that kind of makes a little difference in the fourth quarter. Is there anything you see out there that the Wizards kind of really need to, kind of nudge them over? Because, as these margins go in these playoff series, and fans kind of don't remember, the margins are really slim, and sometimes these little maneuvers kind of put you over the hump a little bit, especially when you're so close.
Right. Again, it's cliche to say, but I think they need an upgraded backup point guard. You want somebody to come in the game like a Nate Robinson or just someone to come in so that the offense still runs similar to how Wall runs it. It's fluid. They're running the ball, and you're able to get Beal or whatever starter wants to run with the second unit. They're able to get easy shots. They don't have to feel like they do the heavy lifting, and they just don't have that right now. And I think that makes a huge deal. If the Wizards starters jump out to a 10-point lead and they're running and they're gunning, and then a backup point guard comes in and Rasul Butler and Martell Webster or Bradley Beal are able to run and get open shots, it just helps with the fluidity of the game. It's a little frustrating to have Andre Miller come in and all of a sudden things kind of slow down, and he'll have his flashes of brilliance, but it's not the same I don't worry about the bigs. The Wizards have plenty of bigs, even though some of them are on ice right now. They're there, they're available. But I think a backup point guard is a legitimate. That's a legitimate need. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I think that maybe last month or a month ago, and gosh, once again going to give praise to this guy. But when Kevin Seraphin is playing, he played against the Spurs, and he still struggles with consistency, but he's actually making, the Sixers he's made, like these post moves, like legitimate post moves. I don't know where the hell they've been for 5 years, but like legitimate post moves where I'm like, you're playing defense, you're rebounding, you're getting the ball, making a strong move to the hoop, and that's always been kind of my like pet peeve with him. And he's getting a little bit better position at the post. Because I kind of want maybe a Brandon Wright type, like someone come and rebound, play defense, has some good picks. But I don't think that really, I don't really see that really as that coming in and getting Seraphin's minutes would be that big of an upgrade, especially with chemistry issues, especially with potential, on-court chemistry, system issues. I mean, I think that there isn't that big of an upgrade. I think so maybe I'm leaning more into an Aaron Brooks type that comes in the second quarter against the Wizards. Bulls look dead in the water. He comes in, runs, hits a couple threes. You've seen Nate Robinson do that over his career. With Andre Miller, we know he's not going to shoot a three. We know that he can, do some work still on the post game. He's still a liability on the.
He's not going to shoot, period.
He's not going to shoot at all. Yeah, he's not a threat. So they're going to double team. They're going to hedge more onto the shooters on the team. Whereas you kind of maybe need a little jitterbug guy, and the Wizards really don't have a jitterbug guy. And they kind of even when you saw them when they lost to the Suns, they kind of got exploited because they couldn't kind of stay in some of the second unit kind of fast guys. And it hasn't been a major liability, but there has been one liability on this team, and it kind of has been. I mean, from a defensive standpoint, it has been Andre Miller on the second unit a little bit. It hasn't been exposed as much, but if we're gonna find that is there. Now, granted, he's the oldest guy in the league, and I feel terrible shitting on him like this. I like him. He's a professional. I think he's another coach on the floor. I think all those things, but in the context of wanting an upgrade for a team that's goal is to win, to advance farther than they did last year. Especially who are the Hawks running out there? Dennis Schroeder, 22, dude, right? the Hawks are running him. Gravis Vasquez, I mean, he's what, 20, I don't know what he is now, 26, 27, at least 12 years younger than Andre Miller. Aaron Brooks, like I said, I think that, the Wizards maybe need to go and someone that can actually shoot the ball as well. Whether or not Nate Robinson and Randy Wittman can get along.
Even Norris Cole.
Norris Cole. Whether or not Randy Wittman and Nate Robinson can get along, I don't know. I think he might cause him to have a heart attack. But I think that you've seen him being able to, he's been able to deal with Gooden. Gooden doesn't play any defense really. You've seen him be able to deal with some type of personalities, and I think that he's kind of matured a little bit as a coach, especially for his first few stints in that aspect. I mean, he's still a hard-ass Randy Wittman, but I think that he's been able to deal with players' flaws a lot better on this run than he maybe has in the past. Let's wrap this up and go watch Swaggy P. Rashad, it has been a good hour. We went a little farther, but you need to get some of these things off your chest, and I'm glad that you were able to. Right. I was able to allow you that opportunity. What is the next games you're covering, or what do you have looking forward to in the next few weeks here with this team?
I don't even know the next game I'm covering. It seems like they've been on the road for 3 years now, so I'm just watching. We'll see when they come home. But I'm looking forward to them finishing strong and starting the post All-Star break strong too. That'll be key.
All right, well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending an hour here on Picks and Roll. Adam McGinnis, Rashad Mobley, and next time on Picks and Roll, we will talk about Swaggy P. All righty, bye-bye. Just waking up in the morning, gotta thank God. I don't know, but today seems kinda